Ironside will not be seen tonight, so we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. In the States, good afternoon, and overseas, good evening. Welcome to Word Balloon, the Comic Conversation Show. John Suntress here. It's appropriate that we're doing this in the afternoon hours of America because it's the evening hours of Europe. And we'll be talking about European comics with an old friend, one of my favorite podcasters and bloggers from Pipeline Comics. It's Augie DeBleick, everybody. Good to see you, Aug.
Thank you, John. Good to see you guys, too. And by you guys, I mean you singular, of course. It's like the Word Balloon Network here.
I'm big and tall, Augie. Don't kid yourself. I seat 4 easily, so that's quite all right. But no, man, I'm really glad you're back podcasting. Augie, you're one of the original podcasters. I mean, I go back to 2005. Tell everyone when you started podcasting back in the day.
I mean, to be fair, the comic book podcast actually started. I looked this up recently because it was a question. It was January 5th, 2005. So I started 2 podcasts at the same time, that Christmas break of 2004. One was a DVD-related one, and the other that started, I think, maybe December 31st. I had a Christmas break, so I had time to play with things and learn how to do these things. So I started that podcast, and that ran like 100 weeks or something. And then I started the comic book show January 5th. And I'm not taking credit for this. I'm not saying everyone copied me. It definitely didn't happen that way. It's just podcasting was starting to come into its own thing. People were hearing about it. Everyone else had the same idea. I just beat them by a week. And so we had a bunch of shows coming out right after that.
You're an early adopter. Chris Marshall, Collected Comics Library, was earlier. Comic Geek Speak was earlier by a few weeks from me. I started in May 10th of 2005. And
you were a late bloomer.
Yeah, you know. Well, I honestly, I put us in astronaut categories.
Oh yeah.
And, I will say that you would be Chuck Yeager. I'm one of the Mercury astronauts, and because and then 2009, you're a Gemini 9, which is fine.
Yeah,
that's still that's where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin came from. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But I do love the celebrities like Kevin Pollak and Mark Maron who are like, wow, we started in 2009, 2010. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Have a sandwich. We were doing it for years before you guys even thought about doing it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do like that. Yeah, I invented the podcast in 2010. No, not really. Not really.
They talk about the early days of podcasting, back in 2009, 2010, when I guess NPR started hitting it big. But the rest of us were there long before all those people.
Hey man,
Back when
and
it was literally just us people at home with a microphone and a computer before there were, studios and networks getting on and all that stuff.
yeah, man. And I even have a friend, Dwayne Burgard, who did basically a podcast in like 2000 at that same time that everyone was doing streaming video, and it was like the size of a postage stamp to watch
Yeah.
it, you
Yep.
know. But
Yep.
I mean, hey, no, that's great. That's digital content at the beginning and everything. So,
Yeah.
you know,
You look at iFanboy, and they're republishing their videos from their old days, and that was like pre-YouTube. And their videos, they blow them up for YouTube, and they start looking a little grainy. And if you look at the
sure,
original video files, because I have a couple of them saved still, they
that's
were,
funny.
they're postage stamp size for sure.
I haven't talked to the guys in a while. Have you talked to them lately?
Just basically on Twitter and Instagram and all the social networks kind of thing. Nothing too personal lately.
That's cool. Ron
Yeah.
Richards was working at Marvel, and out of the blue, he's like, "Hey, man, you want to talk to Chris Claremont? We're doing this like Marvel Legacy big, volume of X-Men stuff." And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, I never had the opportunity. So that's how my first conversation with Chris Claremont happened, was because of Ron Richards. So
we have our own social network, the Podcasters Network.
hey, man, I mean, truly, that first, I think we all met at San Diego in 06 at that first podcaster panel that we all did. And hey, man, and seriously, I love that we're talking about podcasting to start, because truly, I mean, because, well, seriously, man, how many peers do we know that can speak with this kind of like back then idea and everything? And God, Leah Taylor was doing I Read Comics, and Mr. Phil and Charlito were doing
that's right,
Indie Spinner Rack.
And this was all before, especially with you, and I think you're probably one of the last people, but this was before iTunes included podcasts. If you wanted to listen to a podcast in the car, you had to download it to your computer, plug your iPod in, copy it over. Or I used to, at one point, because it was so difficult sometimes to get the iPod to play in the car for various reasons, there weren't always USB ports in cars back then. I would burn CDs.
Me too.
I'd burn a CD of an hour-long show, and that would be it. And I just throw the CD out afterwards, which is horrible.
I did it all the time, Augie. Absolutely. Yeah. And I even know too, to hand out my shows to prospective guests. I made a data CD with a lot of MP3 files, and I explained to them, like, you can't play this on the plane on the way back, because a couple of them emailed me like, "Why can't I hear anything?" And I'm like, "No, they're files. You put them on your computer and then download, and then you can do stuff." But yeah, I remember handing them out to Ed Brubaker and Gail Simone and Bendis. So that's kind of how
you brought them all in for us.
Absolutely. So and here we are.
I did a few interviews back in the day, like maybe 6 or 8 of them, but I just never. I didn't have the time to put that all together, and I knew enough people I probably could have, but I let you do that. I just figured I'd do the new releases each week, was what my show is all about.
Well, that's the thing, man. No, you were doing reviews, and that's great. I mean, and I appreciated that. And also, of course, prior to you doing the podcast and stuff, you had the Pipeline blog the column at CBR, right?
Yeah.
When did that start?
Yeah. So it is actually this year's the 25th anniversary. It's been 25 years since I started it, and I haven't stopped. That's the one thing I have not stopped. I missed like 1 week during COVID times, which I think we can all forgive. But otherwise, I've written about comics every week for 25 years, and that'll be in June. It will be the actual anniversary. So, and before that, before it was at CBR, I was on Usenet. The first like 100 columns were on Usenet, and then Jonah picked me up, thank God, and paid me. And I was at CBR for I forget how many years after that, 15 years, whatever it was. And then CBR got bought out and I got let go. I was at comicbook.com for a little bit off and on. And now I won't go back. I like being on my own and having my own thing and not worrying about, all the various how to submit columns to people thing anymore. So it's my own freedom, and I'll take this way. Thank you.
I understand, man. I'm going to make a banner for the URL, which is pipelinecomics.com, just so, people can find it if they don't already know. And no, man, I'm thrilled that you're doing it. And I even noticed your New Year's resolutions of what you want to do, and as far as expanding and continuing and experimenting in doing some other things. And I don't blame you, man. I am trying to do the same thing Beyond Word Balloon. I've kind of let the cat out of the bag. I got to get the logo here. This isn't the final logo, but I started working on this before Mike Nesmith's death. But you kind of tell there it's going to be
cool.
a documentary series, really looking into the monkeys, everything. Really,
it's right up your alley.
Well, yeah, man, I was an old oldies DJ back in the day. You're right about that. So no, it's sad because I mean, obviously, it was heartbreaking when Mike passed away at the end of the year, but for them not to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by now, and I have a feeling with Nesmith's death that they'll probably put him in.
Yeah, that'll be next time around.
That's my guess. That's my guess. Oh, Len is joining us. Good to see you, Len, the Englishman in San Diego.
Oh, thank you, kind sir.
Congrats on the anniversary. Absolutely. That's fantastic.
We'll have to celebrate it somehow. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure something out. I'll think of something, I hope. I'll just write an extra long review that day.
Well, and like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm really glad we're doing this in the afternoon because it's evening in the European markets, and we're going to be talking about European comics. And I know you're
my people.
Yes, indeed, man. And I know that's a big focus of Pipeline Comics, and kind of your milieu. Obviously, I grabbed for both the lobby card and here for a moment your favorite character there, Asterix, and I didn't realize there's a Netflix series underway. What's happening with that?
Yeah, that's going to be a 5 half-hour episode limited series. It's either going to be out next year or the year after, depending on who you believe right now. It's based on Asterix and the Big Fight, which was volume, I always forget, 6, 7, 8 in the series. So they're going to take that story and sort of expand it out and make it into a 5-episode series. They just found an animation studio for it. So that was the big news that came out last week. So we're looking forward. Asterix has been starting to come to America. I mean, Paper Cuts here in New York has the license, has been reprinting the books for the past couple of years, and they're going to be through the entire series in the next couple of years. They've been going through it pretty quickly. And now with the Asterix series, hopefully that'll expand, the knowledge in America of the character. And then hopefully on top of that, what I'm hoping for is Netflix will bring the Asterix movies over, because there were a few live action movies and a few 2 or 3 computer animated movies in the past, 20 years that are literally not available on streaming. Anyway, I think Asterix the Olympic Games is, but the rest of them aren't available. I've never even seen most of them. I imported a Blu-ray of one of them once, but unless you want to import the Blu-ray from some other country, you're not going to be able to find them. So I'm hoping Netflix, as part of this deal, gets the series, that becomes popular enough, and then from there they go to the movies and begin streaming those. So fingers crossed, I hope.
How far back does Asterix go? Because I do remember it in the 80s, right?
Oh, yeah, no, it just celebrated its 60th birthday a couple of years ago. It was 1959.
Wow.
October 29th, 30th, something like that, 1959. It was created for Pilote Journal, which was a weekly magazine that was just being created. The editorial director, editor-in-chief was René Goscinny. The artist in charge was Alberto Derzo, and they needed material to fill this weekly magazine. The two of them came up with an idea for what they were going to do. Then they realized someone else had already done it, so they came up with Asterix instead. And Asterix hit pretty big in France over the course of the next couple of years. The graphic novel started coming out by 61, 62, and it just became a huge thing in France. And while it never has completely come over here, up until this Paper Cuts deal, all the books that were available were published in Great Britain, the English editions, and they were great. The translations, they were awesome. That's what most people grew up on. But they're now, now we're getting actual American editions, which have more of an American vernacular to the English translation, which some people don't like, but hopefully for people who are new, it'll make more sense to them. And they also include, which I think is good, and I think the Brits should have done this too. They have they use Latin phrases in the book sometimes here and there, and in the Paper Cuts editions, they're putting the translations at the bottom of the panel rather than at the bottom of the page, or not at all. So that's going to be helping a lot for American readers to not have to work as hard as we had to work to figure out what all this stuff meant.
I hope it does catch on, and I'm assuming is Jim Salicrup still Paper Cuts?
Yes, yep, that's him. That's his team there.
That's
cool. The license. I know there was some competition for that license a few years back now. I know a couple different publishers were looking at it, but Paper Cuts landed it, and good for them, and I'm glad to have them all available here. Now, they do publish them at a smaller size. They don't publish them at the full Franco-Belgian album size. It's not too much smaller, but if you really love that art, go ahead and get the British editions to see it at the full size, because I think it does look better still.
All right, now, and I always mispronounce Franco-Belgian comics. Is it BD? Is it?
Yeah, it's BD, BD if you're an American, I guess, but it's Le Bande Dessinée. Le Bande Dessinée. My apologies to all your French viewers. Yeah, Bande Dessinée. So it's comic strips, basically. The ninth art, as they call it. After, I don't remember all 8 of them in front of there, but, radio, dance, playwrights, novels. I forget what the rest of them are. There's an article on pipelinecomics.com. You can find it there.
I like that. The ninth art. That's cool.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
that's much more loftier. That's better than graphic novel, frankly, I think. The ninth art.
Yeah, they take it seriously over there, which is why I like them so much.
Oh, dude, I so agree. And truly, my education in European comics started probably in the 80s, going to direct market shops that were importing Mobius and, his great Lieutenant Blueberry stuff, along with his cosmic stuff. No, I'm and again, it hit me at the right age, being college age and stuff, still loving superheroes, still loving what's called mainstream comics, but looking for, oh man, that's a great looking noir story. That's a great looking Western, and truly it really opened my eyes to the international world, and the fact that there were countries that were telling much more sophisticated stories in comics. And I really think the Americans are really only starting to catch up with them in the last 20 years or so, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, my story is fairly similar enough in that I didn't get into it until the early 2000s, when I'd see them for sale at Fantagraphics' booth and NBM's booth back in the early 2000s at San Diego Comic-Con. And I picked a few up there, and I got to like them, and I read some of them, but there wasn't that much stuff out. The good thing now, and this is why I've been able to do this with the site and focus the site like this, is that digital translations make it possible to get access to a whole range of comics that nobody's printing here yet. Hopefully yet. Because it's relatively cheap to just translate a book and re-letter it and publish it. So they actually have a consortium. It's called Europe Comics, which a bunch of the publishers have gotten together to say, hey, we want to get this book out to the English audience. So let's, pool our resources. They had a grant from France, believe it or not, to fund this work. And they've been basically translating and republishing in English digital editions, at least, like maybe anywhere from 5 to 15 books every month for the past, I don't know how many years now, 5 or 6 that I know of, at least. At the end of each month, that's what I look forward to seeing. Get all new books.
Are they cooperating with you in terms of recognizing that you're, out there trying to give coverage? And
yes.
Are they, will you do interviews, even written interviews with creators? Have you already done that on the site?
I have not. I'm game for it. I know it's tricky with a lot of them. A lot of them don't, aren't comfortable with English, and my French is not comfortable enough to be conversational yet.
Sure.
Thank you, Duolingo. I'm getting there, but nowhere near being able to. Maybe I could write an interview with them. Hopefully someday we'll get to that point, but right now I just I skip over it because I think it's just be too much work to go back and forth to make sure we understood each other and got what we needed. So we never know. I'm leaving that open in the future, hopefully, to do it.
How about Humanoids and what they're doing? And I know Mark Waid is there, as publisher and kind of moving stuff forward. I just spoke to him about that history of science fiction that came from Humanoids, and I believe was originally a French comic. Beautifully drawn, just fantastic. I love the narrative. I love the narrative for it too. Really interesting.
They have some great documentary comics over there in France, and of course, I'm going to draw a complete blank right now on any of them. I've read a few, but there are a lot. It is a known genre for things. There's a couple that I would love to read. There's actually one that's a history of Pilote Journal, that magazine that Asterix came from. There is the journalist interviewed all the artists who were involved with the magazine in the late 60s before things kind of fell apart a little bit. But he took those interviews and created a comic book out of it, created a 60-page graphic novel of all his interviews with these people. And I've been able to sort of read bits and pieces of it and look through the art. It looks great. I just haven't had a chance to either do the work of typing everything into Google Translate or just find the time to do that, to be honest. My French isn't up there yet. So there are books like that. There are, comic books about comic books, which right up my alley. So give me more of those, and hopefully they'll translate them someday for me.
That's great to hear. And of course, here in America, I love what Van Lente and Ryan Dunleavy have done with their comic book history of comics, and now with animation. So I think that's really great. I wonder, and I haven't seen any articles about Pipeline, but lately, Charlie Hebdo, the magazine there that really suffered a moment of terrorism, obviously. Since that incident, I haven't heard much about them. Are you aware of like how they're doing, and are they chugging along?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure what their publishing schedule was even before that. I don't think they were. I think they were a monthly. Although now that I think about it, hebdo, the word hebdo de, I forgot. I'm gonna blank on the word now, but it doesn't mean weekly. Hebdo de mer, something like that. Means weekly, but I don't think they're a weekly to begin with. But they're sort of, they're a very heavily satirical, very political magazine. I mean, that's what got them in trouble, so to speak. And yeah, to put it mildly. And I'm not sure what their current publishing schedule is like, or what's going on, to be honest, because I don't think that's included on. There's a website in France called Izneo, IZNEO.com, which is basically the French version of Comixology. And they have all the French books, and then they also have an English side. So they have all the comics, that are available in English over there. Plus, they also carry a lot of the American comic book companies now. Obviously, they don't have Marvel and DC, but they do carry, Boom and all the other sort of smaller publishers who are willing to license their work out over there. So they have a lot of that stuff, and I don't get enough over to the French side now as I used to back in the early days, because there's just so much stuff to read in English now, thankfully.
Yeah, well, and also it's great for these American companies that aren't DC and Marvel, because they are publishing genres that I think do play better in the European market. So why not? Again, I think of Hugo Pratt and some of these other classic great European artists and cartoonists that would make these other genres, and it's like, no, I want that stuff, or the great stuff that came from South America. I have to admit, as popular as it is here, manga is still a challenge to me because of the way that it's left right, and I can't. My old man brain won't work that way. I don't know why.
Well, come over to France and Belgium with me, my friend. We have bigger pages. I mean, the art is smaller because they jam more stuff in the page, but they're bigger pages and they read left to right, so you're clear.
Absolutely, man. No. And again, the Franco-Belgian comics that I do become aware of, I absolutely pounce on, and I'm like, oh no, I want that. I like their storytelling. And again, I love the genres that they choose. And no, there's beautiful books being made, and it's a big comic book world. So I do want to learn more about what's playing in the rest of the world. And again, I still love my superhero stories. I don't deny that. But it's interesting. How about go ahead. No, please.
No, I just say there's a lot of Franco-Belgian material that I think would play really well over here that's not being printed. A lot of it's available digitally now, but I still hear a lot from people who say they don't want to read digitally. They only want published books. And while that frustrates me to a great deal, I understand. I have, trust me, bookcases full. But you can see one bookcase over there, one's behind me over there. There's the bigger one over here that goes all the way up to the ceiling. I get it, and I love them too. But sometimes, if you want the great material, you take it the way you can get it. And there is some stuff over there that I think translates really well to what comic book fans in America like, as far as action or adventure or comedy, even drama, that kind of stuff. And they have art styles that are compatible with certain artists in North America too. So I think if there's a certain education aspect to this, obviously, and that's part of Pipeline Comics' mission these days, is to show people what this stuff looks like and to try to make those comparisons back and forth between what we have here versus what they have there. And if you like this, you might like that. I need to do more of that, to be honest. But I think if people open their eyes and just give it a try, check out Comixology, check out Comixology if you're okay digitally. Go to the sales page. There's always at least one sale going on at any given time for European comics. And they're as little as like $1.99 for a 48 or a 64 page book that's going to take you an hour to read.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. It's a great value in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And I think if more people tried that, that'd be the first best step to get into this.
I really believe that you'll reach an age in your 30s or whatever. I mean, I think, again, that was a long time ago for me. I understand, but I honestly, I think it was kind of when I came back to comics in the 90s that all of a sudden I really was looking even harder. Again, back in the 80s, out of college, every now and then, like I said, a Lieutenant Blueberry or something like that would hit my radar and be like, oh, that's so beautiful. Of course I'm going to read this. This is gorgeous. So here, we've already got Gert wants to know, will Susky and Whiskey
Susk and Whisk.
Yeah, tell me about Susk and Whisk.
I'm just only vaguely familiar. I think are they Belgian or Dutch? I've seen the book before. I have not read it, to be honest. So would it fit over here? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I've seen the book. I think it's about two kids, and I think it's a comedy, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll wait for the thing to show up on the screen. Yeah, let us send us a link. I'll go over. But I know it's very popular over there, and I've had one or two people actually recommend it to me over the years, but I don't think any of it's available in English yet. And if it's in Dutch, I'm really lost. It's Belgian. Okay, good. So there's a chance, it's a 50-50 chance of it either being in Dutch or being in Belgium or being in French because it's out of Belgium, which I love. I love Belgium. My grandparents came over here from Belgium. It's part of the connection here. But, the whole socio-political French versus English versus Dutch versus German thing, I can't explain it to you. Don't ask. That gets a little crazy sometimes.
I understand. He says that, it's Dutch, obviously. That's cool. Hey, I would love, one of my favorite things, and it was closed the day that I walked by it, but 20 years ago, I was in Amsterdam, and there was a bookstore, and there were just so many graphic novels in the front window, but it was Sunday, so it was closed. And I'm like, I would totally have gone in and bought stuff. I was so bummed. So what are you going to do?
I was working on an article once, and I may still finish one of these days for, where you can buy comic books in Paris. And just going through the directory of it, how the joke is in America, you can stand on one street corner in front of a Starbucks, and on the opposite corner is another Starbucks. I literally found that example for a comic book store in Paris. And unfortunately, the one has since moved down the street a little bit. But there are so many stores that are, they're beta, and then they're also for sale in all the newsstands and the train stations and all that kind of stuff. They're just a part of life. They're part of everyday life, and they're always around. Unlike, here we're unfortunately for various reasons, mostly economic, we're still stuck in comic book stores for at least, the Marvel DC superhero stuff. The obviously the new wave of graphic novels and young adult fiction, that kind of stuff does reach out further. And that's, I think, why you're seeing that stuff boom even more than you're seeing, the superhero stuff that we are used to and we grew up with doing right now. But I think that's why the market in France our market is becoming more similar to their market in some ways, just as we have that sort of graphic novel boom. It's just that our graphic novels tend to be smaller because kids want to put them in their backpacks. And, the European ones are standing by the much larger album size, which I prefer because I think it looks better. Yeah.
No, you're right about that. I completely agree. Do you hope to go to Angoulême one day?
I would love to some year. I don't know. Obviously Angoulême is having its own COVID issues, and it's happening, I think, in March, the end of March this year in person, although publishers are already starting to drop out. But hopefully at some point in the long-term future, I mean, it may have to wait until my daughter's in college and I can get out of the house for a week without anyone noticing so much. But, that's a long-term plan. But I have many long-term plans, John. My Belgian citizenship is another one.
I saw that article on the on the Pipeline website, pipelinecomics.com. That's we should watch the articles.
Yeah, we should explain this one to people. Belgium has a new passport. It just came out, I think, yesterday or the day before now, which includes Belgian comic book characters inside the passport, including like Tintin. Sorry, Tintin. I'm going to be the American. Tintin. Lucky Luke is in there.
Wow.
All the big names that came out of Belgium in particular. Largo Winch is in there, one of my favorite series. They're all in that thing. I think you have to actually use a black light to see the comic book characters, but the background you can see as it's printed. It's wacky. But I want one, but the only way to get one is you have to be a Belgian citizen. So I found a loophole, John, which because you've read this article, and I want to explain it to people because if you listen watching this right now, if you are in touch with the Belgian consulate, send them my email address, Augie@pipelinecomics.com. If you're spreading the Belgian arts out to a broader audience across the world, I think in particular the English market, that's my job here, they might consider you for citizenship, or at least honorary citizenship. So this is my in. I'm taking it all the way. I mean, I can't, it was my grandparents who came over, so I'm a generation removed from being able to get that citizenship. So I'll take that. I'll take whatever I can get.
Aug, I swear, if there was a petition that we could make and you could be the American ambassador to Belgium for comics,
yes,
you'd have my vote in a heartbeat.
I know where the Belgian consulate is in New York City. It's only like 30, 40 minutes away from me as I stand right here. I can be over by the UN at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza in an hour. Let's go. Let's do this thing.
That'd be great. Pardon me.
It's okay.
My sleep is all over the place, Augie. It's not you. I swear to God.
No, I understand.
I wake up at 3 a.m. I do a bunch of work, and then I sleep for a couple hours, and I wake up again. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I have to wake up early, too.
Mentioning Tintin, I was really hoping that Spielberg movie would have really ushered in more awareness, because the entire story, not only the comics themselves, but the backstory of, am I saying it right, Hergé, the creator?
Yep.
I mean, a fascinating story, a guy that was living and occupied the Netherlands when the Nazis were occupying it, and had, it was expected to continue, and kind of did, and sent Tintin into these weird kind of fantasy adventures so he could avoid the reality of living under a Nazi occupied country at the height of World War II. I just find all of that incredibly interesting, and I've watched really great documentaries about Hergé and Tintin, or as again we look at it, American. Tintin.
We'll just do Tintin. Yeah. It's easier that way. There's a lot of great stories from World War II. My favorite one is Spiro Journal, that magazine there behind me, you can see. I imported those from France.
Hold
Thank
on.
you.
I'll zoom in there.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, there it is. See it right there.
There's one over here. There's one over there.
Yes,
there's a whole pile of them down here. It's amazing how cheap you can import them from France if you want to. It's great. They've been publishing weekly since the magazine started in like 1930, whatever it was. The only time they ever stopped publishing was when the Nazis had literally cut off the paper supply. I mean, at one point, they were racing pages from Belgium into Paris to get them published just to keep the magazine going every week. But the magazine, I forget how many thousands of issues it's up to now, still being published to this day every week. Still, the sales aren't what they used to be, obviously, but the only thing that ever stopped them was the Nazis, which I think is a pretty good history to have as a magazine.
100%. My God, yes. Gert has a good question here. He sees the U.S. comics mostly as a television series and the European comics as a movie as far as format goes. Do you agree or see it differently?
I think it makes sense, just that the American comics tend to be serialized, which TV shows are serialized, and European books are done in graphic novel format, as we call it here, and albums. So I think it makes more sense that the isolated complete stories per album would make more sense for a movie, which is kind of why it's a little weird they're making Asterix into a 5-part miniseries. But I'll have trust in them to see what they come up with. They're going to expand it a little bit, I'm sure. But I think that's a good way to look at it. But there's also, in modern French publishing, there's a lot more album series. There's a lot more of these books that aren't self-contained. They're maybe 3 album storylines, or they have what they call cycles, which we'd probably call seasons over here, where they tell each album is sort of an individual story, but they kind of link together to tell longer 3 or 4-part series as it goes. And that's the end of the cycle, and they start a new cycle. There's books like Alone, which is published in English by Cinebook, so you can buy that. It's a pretty good series. They did do a movie based on that, believe it or not, which I'm not sure if it did too well or not, because they never made a second one. And then there's a book called Franck, which I think we just say Frank, which was a 4-part story. And there was one that did get printed in English, Harmony it's called, and I forget, it might have been a Blaze who published it. That was, I think, 5 or 6 albums total. So I think it was like a 3-album story and another 3-album story. I haven't finished reading it, to be honest, so I don't know. But they do tend to have more of those series now. But just classically speaking, the books tend to be isolated, 1 story per album. So that's another selling point to my American friends. If you don't like 6-issue storylines, buy one of these European albums, get the complete story, and be done with it. And buy it on sale. It's cheaper that way. You'll love it.
That's
then
great.
you'll pay full price. Yeah.
Are there specific stories that you could recommend for specific genres? If I like, I love a good Cold War spy story. Can you recommend I mean, I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse as far as what you're reading and what you're looking for in terms of the European comics.
I've read a few of those. I mean, Stalin is Dead, which they did make into a movie in America with Steve Buscemi, and it is a great book, a really funny book. As far as that goes, if you want more of a crime kind of thing, there are a lot of crime. I have a list over here I was holding back on just in case. Let's go with the other things. If you like science fiction books,
sure,
go with Orbital. There's a book called Orbital. I think it's 8 books long. And each story is a 2-parter. So each album is, every first and second book are one story. There's a lot of those examples in French publishing also. A beautiful book. The art in there is spectacular. It's like watercolored pencil art, something I don't even know how to describe it. But that's got, I think, 8 books out, and they are available in print, so you can read them that way. I would say read them digitally because the brighter colors on the screen look better, I think. So you have something like that. If you want something more of, and this is when you'll like, John, wait for this one. You're going to love this. If you're looking for more of a sort of an action, adventure, thriller kind of book, there's one called Ken Games, which is one of the earliest books I read when I started pipelinecomics.com. I recommend it all the time to American audiences. Not enough people have followed my suggestion on that, but those who have always come back and say it was a great book. It's a 3-parter. There was a 4th book afterwards where they kind of wrapped up some loose ends, but the core story is 3 parts.
Okay.
It's about 3 friends, one of whom I think he was an accountant or a banker, but in reality, he's lying to his friends. He's a poker player professionally. The woman who is his fiance, I guess, is pretending to be a waitress, but in reality, she's a hit woman. And their friend is this, is supposed to be a math graduate student, but in reality, get this, he's a boxer. He's a professional boxer who is really good with numbers. So when he fights, he sees the numbers in his head and can figure out the odds of which move he should make and what their power is and all that stuff. So, and of course, the lies all come together at the end of the first book and all hell breaks loose. But it's 3 books. It's beautiful art. Definitely recommended that one because you get those thriller aspects. There's some good humor to it and all that. It's the one I always go with first.
That's amazing, man. People are also recommending Artist Edition Index. Says Vice Squad Volume 1 is a great read if you like war and crime.
Vice Squad. I think. Yeah, Vice Squad, double check me on this. I think that's the one that the same artist as Glorious Summers. And of course, when you're on live TV, you forget names. I'll think of it in a minute, but go on to the next one.
There you go. And then crime, Gert says Rick
Ricochet.
Or Hochet.
Ricochet, which kind of sounds like Ricochet.
Yes, it does.
That's he can correct me if I'm wrong on this one. That's a classic series that they had a recent revamp of. I read the first book. I think there's 3 books out right now, or at least 3 books that are published in English. And I liked the first book. It was really good. I don't think I've ever reviewed it, which is my bad, but it is a good series. Beautiful art on that one too. Very clean.
That's awesome. Now Craig points out, and I was going to get to this, that beyond Pipeline and podcasting and everything else, of course, Augie is well known as a letter hack hero. Indeed, back when there were mailbag columns at the back of comics, Aug was a very often letter writer, and right there with guys like T.M. Maple and people like that. I mean, that was always the name that stuck out to me.
Olaf Beamer.
Well, who else?
Olaf Beamer was the other guy. He was in the Netherlands. Ironically,
I remember Olaf. Sure.
Last I heard from him, he was translating American comics into Dutch. So
that's awesome.
That was his career. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I love hearing shit like that. So, when was your first letter published, Aug?
Star Trek: The Next Generation by DC Comics, issue number. It was either 11 or in the teens somewhere. I forget. You never forget your first, John. That was the first one, and then things rolled on through the 90s, and I didn't shut up. We didn't have blogs yet. We didn't have podcasts. I had some outlet, and the only outlet I had was letter writing. And I'm pretty sure to this day, my success is down to basically 2 things. And one is that I had a name people remembered. This name does not come, this is not Matt Smith. Nothing against you, Matt. All 3 comic book artists named Matt Smith.
or the 11th Doctor, of course. But go on.
Yeah, exactly. like Olaf Beamer's name stood out too. and that I was able to, I'm sure they got a lot of letters that they couldn't print just because it would take too much editing work, and I could put two sentences together. So, and I printed mine out on a computer, which in the early 90s wasn't necessarily a gimme. So it was easy enough for the assistant editor to type up in their spare time and paste those up on boards. But yeah, those were fun days. I used to count, like, each week would be great because you get your stack of books, and I'd open to the back real quick to see how many, if I had any letters published. And I think 1 week my record was 3 in 1 week, but it wasn't always every week.
No, but that's got to be a great feeling. Hell, when I was writing boxing for Boxing Illustrated and stringing and writing about local fights in Illinois and Indiana and Wisconsin and stuff, oh my God, when the issue came out and my little agate report of the fight, oh my God, I was walking on cloud nine. It was a great feeling. Sure, man.
Seeing your name in print never gets old.
No, I hear you. That's fantastic. No, and Craig, I'm really glad you're remembering some of these names like Sarah Beach and Jim Kelly.
Sarah Beach, she was in the Batman titles, as I recall.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And in fact, Craig says that he loves seeing Augie's letters in the pages of Batman and the Flash. There you go.
I was in there a couple times. Yep.
That's cool.
I was more regular in Eric Larson's title. So if you are ever reading Savage Dragon in the 90s, the odds were pretty good I was in there. I think 100 of my letters were published by Eric alone. So.
Well, and in the last few years, when I'd see you at conventions, you were always walking around with Eric and stuff.
Yeah, yep. He's Eric and Chris Eliopoulos, both great guys.
Yes.
And if it weren't for probably those letters, then reaching out to the online stuff, the pipeline column, and meeting them in conventions after that, it all kind of snowballs together. So who'd have thought those first letters I wrote when I was like 13 or 14 would eventually turn into this?
That's awesome, man. Yes, whatever this is, exactly. More recommendations of Eurocomics from everybody. Dan Casino says Image recently published Gilliam March's Carmen.
Excellent book.
Amazing. And he says Ablaze is publishing Animal Kingdom right now. So that's awesome. Is that which came first, the comic, or is that related to the TV Animal Kingdom as well?
No. These are both original European books. Guillaume March's Carmen, I think it took him a number of years to do that. It's really a masterpiece. Even if you don't necessarily like his work at DC, check this book out because it's getting a hardcover collection sometime this year. I think in the spring somewhere. But it is just a beautiful book about. It's about a girl who basically commits suicide, but gets caught in between heaven and hell with her guardian angel, talking her way through what happened and why this all happened.
Oh, wow.
And it's an inventive book. His layouts are great. His art is beautiful. And it was originally, I think, 2 albums in France, but Image published it as 5 or 6 issues. So it's done now. It'll be collected soon. Definitely give that one a chance. If you're just a North American Image Comics reader, I'll pretend not to tell you this is European. Go ahead and read it. You'll love it. And Animal Kingdom is one I was waiting for a while, and Blaze is publishing it. I haven't read it yet, but it's basically sort of like what's the one with the farm animals, like communism?
Animal Farm.
Animal Farm. Yeah, it's basically sort of I think it's an Animal Farm kind of story. Yeah, exactly. With talking animals in it, and the art on that one, I've seen pages. Again, beautiful book, great looking stuff. If you like Black Sad, speaking of talking animals coming out of Europe, I think this book will probably be right up your alley also.
That's cool. Dante says he only ever got a question published in Dragon. How much does Dragon weigh in the Dragon Mini #3?
Oh, that's early days right there. That's before me. My first one wasn't published until issue, I think it was 6 or 7. So you beat me to it.
From a business standpoint, Og, because you mentioned the European equivalent of Comixology and stuff, everything that's happening now with Kickstarter and crowdfunding, are Euro creators, are you aware? Are they doing that and working outside the Euro publishers?
There's a lot of sort of politics going on in France about publishers and creators and how one treats the other, and how the publishers are publishing too many books. Now the creators don't get paid enough and all that kind of, a lot of the same stuff you hear here as well.
Sure.
It has a different angle in France specifically, because it got to the point a couple of years ago where the French Minister of Culture had like a 50-page report on the situation with, working conditions for French comic artists and that kind of thing. So there was actually talk of a union forming because of that report, which nothing ever really came of it, to be honest. But There is an ongoing. There's always strife. If you ever pay attention to the news at Angoulême when people are there, there's always a protest somewhere about something. Last time there was it was in person. There were protests about it's part of the culture there. It's not just this side hobby, so they treat it a little differently. It gets treated more seriously. But to get back to your question, there is a Kickstarter like website in Europe, and I forget the name of it. And there's also a Patreon like website in Europe, which again I don't remember the name, which I think some of the younger creators are starting to use and starting to play with now. I don't think it's necessarily been sort of culturally accepted the way it is here in North America, because there is this tradition of the publishers and publishing and that kind of thing. But I think it's getting there. I think it's only a matter of time at this point. We're seeing more. We actually saw Cyril Pedrosa's had one of his graphic novels a couple of years ago was published digitally first before it went into print. You could read it all for free online before, in 3 or 4 different languages, as a matter of fact.
Wow!
Before it went to print. So they're starting to have more of a fluid look at the way comics are published, and I think it's only a matter of time before they have more of the situations over there that we have over here now.
How about the latest wrinkle in creator-owned books, and that's the Substack initiative that we've seen in the last year in particular? Again, is there I don't even know if Substack is purely a North American product or if it too is something international that they're trying to get international cartoonists to do. I know Ilse Chartier, of course, is involved with Tom King's from a business standpoint. They have separate partners, of course. But Love Everlasting is, and I mean, God, I'll tell you, Ilse, I don't know how much
she's amazing.
She really is. My God,
I watch her YouTube videos. I have that comic in another window on this web browser right now. I haven't read it yet, but it's open. I'm going to read it one of these days. I definitely signed up for the Substack, but I don't know, to be honest, if there's a newsletter thing over there. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of new here in North America, to be true, too.
Sure.
So aside from getting the occasional newsletter from the publishers with their latest releases, I don't know if there's anything like that over there yet in France.
Okay.
If there is, it would be great practice for me reading French, so I'll take it. But so if any of you creators are out there and have one, let me know. I'll subscribe, I promise.
Gert has one more recommendation. Days of Sand from Amy DeJong.
Yeah, Amy D. I think it might be DeYoung. I'm not sure, but this is one this is sort of this is a drama set in the Dust Bowl of Oklahoma. It's about a photographer in New York, a young guy who takes the American government's job to go over there to document what's going on in the Dust Bowl. And I forget which government program that was, but he goes over there. It's published in 2 parts in North America, and digitally at least, published in 2 parts. And she, the Amy DeYoung, who did this book, actually took a cross-country trip in America to do all the research for it. So if you go to her blog, you can see all the pictures that she took while she was here. She talked to people at museums in San Francisco and Oklahoma and Texas and all the rest. So you can see all the research she put into it. And the final book it's a great-looking book. It's a great read. I haven't read the second part yet, but I'll get to that. But I did review the first part, so go to pipelinecomics.com and type Days of Sand in the search bar. You'll find it there.
There you go, man. Absolutely. No, honestly, like I'm really, like I said, I'm glad that you took what you were doing at CBR and the like, and put it at your own site now. And I hope you have a good following as far as that goes. And I just in our conversations and listening to your podcast, I've always trusted your reviews and your taste and everything. No, it's always great to catch up and everything. So that's great. What else can we talk about, Aug? I mean, are you I haven't seen Spider-Man yet.
Neither have I. Neither have I.
I can't believe Batman's only a few weeks away. Yeah. Finally, I'm enjoying the streaming product that we're getting everywhere. Peacemaker is great. I'm enjoying Boba Fett. I'll be honest, going back to your letter at Next Generation Comics and stuff, I wish new Star Trek was better. I'm not a big fan of it. I like the cartoons, and truly,
I've heard your praise for that one. I have to try that one of these days. I don't have Paramount. It's one of the streaming services I don't have yet. So one of these months I'll pay for it for a month and watch just the cartoon, because your recommendation has been so strong, and other people I know who are not even comic fans, who are just Star Trek fans, love that series too. So have to get that someday.
Yeah, I mean, even I mean, I'm a harsh critic when it comes to Lower Decks,
Mhm.
but I do think it keeps getting better. And yeah, man, Prodigy really surprised me. It is a kids show, but it's not too
Mhm.
kiddie that it's too simple.
Yeah.
I really liked it. Yeah, I thought it was great. So
I'm trying to think what the last thing I actually watched on streaming. I don't watch
yeah,
enough TV these days. I watch a lot of YouTube, and you're here. I listen to your. By the way, it's just crazy for me to have this conversation with you because I listen to the Word Balloon podcast, and I always have you at like 1.5 speed. So we're having a slow mo conversation here right now. It's a little bit crazy.
am
I think
I too slow? Is my depression medicine dependency? So tell me, Augie, what do you think of what we're doing?
that's going to sound normal when I listen to it on the podcast later. I tell you. It's a problem for me when I'm recording my podcast is I try to speak faster so it sounds like the podcast I listen to. I have to remind myself I'm listening at 1.5 speed. I can speak at a normal pace and people will understand. This is the problem with podcasting.
My dad's oldest sister, who is like my mother, she made it to 98. She would always tell me, "You speak so fast, John. Please slow down. Please slow down." And I'm like, "All right, Anita, I'm sorry. I'll try. I'll do my best." But that's funny. And then also, I have to be honest. I had a childhood friend who had a very low registered voice, and he would kind of talk slow. And my father, one day after he'd come over to play, this is back when we were like in junior high or whatever. He's like, "Hey, when you're done, come upstairs. I want to talk to you." I'm like, "All right." And I won't tell my friend's name. I'll use a fake name and call him Dave. And it's like, "That guy, Dave." Yeah. And he goes, "What's his deal?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Is that kid on drugs?" And I'm like, "No, Dad, what are you talking about? What's with how he speaks?" And I'm like, "Dad, that's just how he talks." And my dad's face, my dad wasn't a tough guy and mean, but really he was convinced that, hey, who are you messing with? And I'm like, his face dropped and he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, now I feel terrible."
Daddy's
And
from the
after
South.
that
That's how they
time
speak.
Dave would come over. He'd be like, "Dave, great to see you. How you been, kid? Nice to see you." Talk him up and everything. And then when my father passed away, Dave was like, "John, I really always appreciated how good your father was to me." And I'm like, "He thought the world of you, Dave."
Your dad was great.
He thought you were on drugs, Dave.
Well,
Oh,
aside
it
from
was
that,
awesome.
I mean, we all have our misconceptions with covers and books and all that stuff. It happens.
No, and I mean, no, I'm around the age of my father when he thought these things. And seriously, my heart went out to him because really his face dropped. Like, really? He's not? No, Dad, not at all. Well, now I feel literally. He's like, "Well, now I feel horrible."
Well, this is good for as we speak about how we slowly become our fathers. Of course, I'm watching YouTube and they're recommending me. Look, I'm a big Meatloaf fan. Missed the guy to pieces, but I also have to say his voice in the last
Sad.
10 years was kind of breaking up anyway. But
Well,
I don't want to see him dead. Don't get me
of
wrong.
course not.
But so now YouTube is recommending all these Meatloaf videos to me, and I'm seeing all these YouTubers react to seeing a Meatloaf video for the first time.
Yes.
And part of me is like, you've never heard Paradise by the Dashboard Light? They played it at every wedding for the past 40 years around here.
That's
Maybe
true.
it's just a Northeast thing.
No. Yeah, you're right.
So I'm watching these videos and realizing, these people doing these reaction videos, I'm technically old enough I could be their fathers. And the Dante 3x speed at the podcast is way too much. My brain can't handle that.
That's like Spock in Star Trek 4 when he's being tested. What is the use of Klingon mummification? Correct.
Man, I tried to get up to 2 at one point, but I'd rather understand and capture what I'm listening to. So anyway, so the Meatloaf Paradise, it's fun, especially with the Paradise by the Dashboard Light, because they don't know what the song is about, and they get to Phil Rizzuto, who they don't know who Phil Rizzuto is, and I grew up a Yankee fan, so I listened to him
Holy cow.
growing up. Yeah, exactly. And they start making out, and all of a sudden their faces start turning. I mean, one in the middle of her podcast was calling her mother and apologizing. It's like, yeah, that's what Bat Out of Hell is all about, people.
But I've seen those same videos where young people are discovering our music for the first time. And it's so funny to watch. Bendis reminded me of this regarding some recent projects, and he knows from teaching the kids that he deals with now. And I actually got a taste of it when I taught briefly at Columbia College 2 years ago. And it's like, no, you got to remember a lot of these kids, they were born after 9/11. So
Yeah.
I had them take highlights from a Seinfeld episode and create a 60-second Seinfeld commercial. And one of the kids walks up to me and goes, so this Seinfeld, was he a comedian as well as doing this sitcom? And it's like, yeah, still out there.
What's your deal?
Or another kid wanted to do a project and he's like, I want to talk about animation, but I really want to talk about old school animation. And I said, like what? And he's like, oh, like Dexter's Lab and Ed, and Eddie. And I'm like, oh yeah, the old stuff. Absolutely.
Don't talk about old stuff unless it's the Termite Terrace and you're talking the classic Bugs Bunny, damn it.
Exactly.
Not this Space Jam stuff. That's not classic Bugs Bunny. Classic Bugs Bunny is Friz Freleng and Chuck Jones.
Have you, being a Francophile, have you watched those Peanuts new cartoons? I don't know if you have Apple TV or anything.
No, on Apple. Yeah, no, I don't right now.
I mean, I haven't watched them yet either. I'm fascinated. I really want to, because God, I love good Charlie Brown animation. Good old Charlie Brown.
They have enough animation studios over there. They keep busy. The animation studios doing Asterix has like 3 movies in the works too. So, Black and White Danger Mouse. Yeah, that was Nickelodeon.
Danger Mouse. I remember in the 80s when Danger Mouse came over here and we started seeing some stuff. Oh, that's so funny. And he says, "Holy cow,
the money
hit at the money store." Another
those ads in the 80s. Yep.
Hilarious.
Well, I was also thinking about the Meatloaf stuff is that when, I'm a little bit younger than you, but when I was a kid, I could hear all of rock and roll. I mean, there's only 20 years worth of rock and roll at that point, 25 years or whatever, whatever cutoff point you want to use. And now that's, double, triple that number since then. So I tried not to judge. That kids haven't heard I Would Do Anything for Love, but I won't do that, even though it was number 1 for 6 weeks in 22 countries and still gets played theoretically on radio stations to this day. Okay, you've been too busy with an era of music that's post rock and roll that doesn't involve guitars or harmony or chorus and verse. It's just basically all TikTok music. And now getting into my old man rant. So yeah, we're all getting older. That's all. I'm trying not to turn to that guy.
Oh, I guys so hear you. I really kind of, as I was approaching 30, I kind of promised myself, like, don't become an old guy. Like, be into new music. You've loved new music ever since you started to become aware of music in your teens. Don't let go of that. Don't let go of that. And here I am, and I have completely let go, and I won't deny it. And it's like, it's sad too, because radio has gotten so protective of us. Well, and certainly like rock stations, just sticking to the old stuff and really focus grouping everything, and pop music kind of sucks that way. But unfortunately, I can't be surprised by radio. I have to go to online sources to hear new music and be like, oh, okay, that's cool. I like that. I'd never heard of that before.
It's better probably for you to go to an online source, and it's more complicated and more expensive. My way of doing it is to have a 13-year-old daughter, because now I have to hear all these songs. And I try not to make fun of them in front of her too often, but it does happen from time to time. I can't help it. Taylor Swift's okay.
My nephews are my focus group, although they're aging out now too. They're both in their 20s, so I can't. If you need another good recommendation for a YouTube channel, Rick Beato, Beato, does a lot of musical analysis. He's a producer. He's I think probably around your age or so. And he talks a lot about the rock and roll era of music and analyzes why music is good and why it today is the way it is, kind of stuff. And I learned a lot from him. So if you want to know more about music, check that channel out. I put in the show notes, but I don't have show notes here. So I understand. For this Monkeys thing that we're making, Neil Sedaka had a great observation that when he would write hit songs back in the 50s and 60s, that it had to sound good on the piano. And then it sounded good when they were making the demos, and then it would sound good when they were making the records. And he said now so much is done on the back end and in post-production, and it is the producers that are really creating the hit sound rather than starting with, the germ of the song. And again, I think that's a very sharp observation from a guy who's in his late 70s, if not 80s, but was, there at the birth of rock and roll and really has kind of seen the trajectory of pop music and where it's gone. So, and it's a great observation that we will lean into as we talk about the Monkees. Hey man, they made fun of the Monkees back in the 60s being this manufactured band. And now you think of the boy bands and Spice Girls and even up to today's K-pop. It's like, the Monkees.
Every generation has it.
There,
Yeah. Every generation has their version of the, quote unquote pre-manufactured pop band. It's just, back in the 60s, that manufactured band was made up of people who could actually sing and could actually play instruments. And it's kind of degraded from there since then to, pushing the sliders on the computer to get the right notes to fit in. And it is what it is, I guess.
Check out Dante's paragraph here. He spent 2 years doing concert security. His introduction to some bands, the whole EDM scene in the early 2010s, tons of subgenres of music he never knew existed prior. He feels me. His introduction to new music currently is looking up the International Hot 100 list. Sure. Very cool, man.
Yep. So we have to do, I guess. I think the other thing we've always heard is that, by the age of 30, you're done finding new music. You just listen to the same stuff for the rest of your life. And
I did get an extension on that because when I was in my 30s, I was working at the classic. Well, it was the alternative rock station in the 90s, WXRT. And in fact, this summer, I went and saw Green Day, Weezer, and Fall Out Boy all together. And Mike Norton was giving me shit. And he's like, "What are you doing there, old man?" I'm like, "I don't know how to break it to you, man, but I was in the music business when Weezer and Green Day were debuting. So I'm like, sorry, man, this is my era as far as I'm concerned."
Now that's an oldies tour now. Congratulations.
Oh, it absolutely was. But again, it was funny. And I understand what Mike was saying. He's like, "You're too old. You shouldn't have been listening to that." And I'm like, no, man, that was my job to listen to that stuff back in the 90s. So yeah. Well,
that was my college, or just, I guess, technically just after college or college era. So that would fit in right for me.
There you go. Well, that's the thing.
Got my Weezer albums.
Yeah, you and Mike are probably like 10 years younger than me, so I can appreciate all that. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're in the same generation. I was thinking too, the other thing was the difference between music coming together is, and the way I heard it once discussed was, it's a difference between having songs and having tracks. Whereas you used to have a song, which was a cohesive, instrumentation, like everyone would play along at the same time, to tracks you now have, which are basically made up of 12 or 15 independent tracks, which they then try to merge together and slide up and down to sound right. And then theoretically put it into an album. Somehow we still have albums, which surprises me. Not the vinyl thing, just collections of songs. Now that everything can just be instantly sent out, why do we still have albums? I'm not even sure. I guess for Grammy consideration.
Well, some do collect them into some sort of, combined idea and everything. But I agree with you. That is kind of the exception. But no, you're right. Albums do still exist. Yeah. Dante says, "I remember being 19 and shunned for liking Weezer's Pinkerton album, and seeing that tour now, that album is considered a classic." Sure.
Yep. There's definitely a rage against them for that album, much the same way They Might Be Giants got in trouble with the John Henry album because it was the first time they brought in other instruments. It wasn't a deal like their third or fourth album, and they dared to bring in a band. It wasn't just John and John anymore.
You ever see them live?
No, I've never have. It's just sad because they're not too far from here.
Yeah, that's another reason why. I mean, I knew they were an East Coast band. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they do play smaller venues, and they do come to New Jersey once in a while, although I know their recent tours are still shifting around, so hopefully one day.
I hear you, man. That's funny. No, I saw them a couple times in the 90s. It was great.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Great. I know. Well, dude, I'm telling you, that 10 years working at WXRT, I was a pig in shit. I mean, it was so exciting, and truly we had access to great shows, and then the bands would come in studio and play for us. So nice. I truly was spoiled for those 10 years of my life in broadcast. It was amazing.
You never realize how good you had it until it's over.
Absolutely. Truly. Every, I mean, my last radio job was 2 years ago. I got downsized, and I mean, I still had fun in radio for my 30 years in radio and stuff, but nothing was like those first 10 in Chicago. Oh, I should say 35 years, because I had 5 years in small market radio before breaking into Chicago. But no, those first 10 years, I was very spoiled. Very,
Yeah.
very.
The closest I could come to that was the time I was more involved with photography when I got my first digital camera. Well, my first digital SLR back in 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And I did some concert photography for a short time. There were a couple
Wow.
like local venues who I would literally just like email cold out of the blue the manager, the tour director for the acts who were coming through and get their okay to come in and shoot. And so
Sure.
I got to see, of course, this being a venue that's an older hall from like 100 years ago for the old vaudeville days that they've remade into a concert hall. There's a few
Sure.
of them in this area, and so you can see the same acts going through the 3 concert halls as they go along. But I got to see like Rick Springfield there, Huey Lewis in the News there. Steve Martin was doing his banjo playing one time, so I got to go see Steve Martin do his stuff. So yeah, so that was. Unfortunately, I kind of ran out of time to do it back then. I had a baby in the house at the time. It was a little tricky, but for a brief period of time, at least, I got to go see a few shows for free. That was fun. but yeah, I wish I could go back and do it now, but I think it's a little more difficult these days.
God, I saw Nick Lowe locally here in September, and especially after these 2 COVID years, it was so nice to be in a room and hear live music and be that close to live music, and it was. I mean, it truly, it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. It feeds the soul. It really does. You're like, oh, yeah, that's that feeling. Oh, it truly, I mean, I'm like, it was such a contented, like 2 hours of music. It was fantastic.
Anyway, I love a good concert movie. Yep.
Yeah, man. Oh, well, dude, let's direct everyone once again to pipelinecomics.com, where you can read the musings of Augie DeBleick and also stay aware of his Pipeline podcast as well as it comes out. And truly one of the guys I lean on to know what's happening in Franco and Belgium comics and European comics in general and everything. So thanks a lot for hanging out. And as always, great to see you. And truly, let's not wait years between our next conversation. If you think there's something I need to know about, let me know. And I will try to make sure that we talk more than once a decade.
No, there's always new stuff coming out every month. So as soon as I find the next big thing, I'll let you know. And one more recommendation for people, Echo, EKHO. John Layman likes it. He mentioned it on this show once before. So go read that one. Trust me. Just trust me.
That's a good one.
Pick it up and look at it.
Very, very cool. I will throw all of Victor Santos's entire bibliography in there. Anytime Victor has something new, he has my immediate attention. I've loved his stuff since he collaborated with Azzarello for one of those little Paradox Press crime books that they used to put out. So was
that Piranha Press or is that
probably Piranha Press?
Piranha. I always forget which one was which now. The 90s. They're so long ago.
Sadly, it's true, but we remember them fondly.
Yeah.
Hey, tonight at 7. All right, I got to do the math. 8:00 Eastern time, 7 Chicago time, 5 West Coast time. I'm talking to Susan Eisenberg, as I love to call her, the animated as Amazon, Wonder Woman herself from the Justice League cartoons. And she was great as the Enchantress on the Masters of the Universe Kevin Smith Netflix series. So we're going to talk, catch up, see how she's doing. And then late tonight, it's Kinescope. Og will be asleep by then.
Oh, boy.
12:30 Eastern, 11:30 p.m. Central Time, 9:30 Pacific. And we're talking about Yul Brynner because along with his acting, he was a very active television director in television's infancy. And we're going to talk about a 1949 Studio One production that he directed called The Storm that features the blacklisted actress Marsha Hunt. And it's a great story, and it's nice to spend a moment and talk about Yul Brynner's directing side of his career. He groomed in a positive way a lot of young male directors. So I know groomed has sadly become a.
He liked X-Men movies a lot, yeah.
So yeah, he didn't touch anybody inappropriately, but he really did teach a lot of great directors who became great filmmakers how to direct in television. So that will all be discussed tonight on the latest episode of Kinescope. So until